The UFC has been going through a long process of increasing the budget and making sure fighters are getting paid more. Sadly, it's not happening soon enough, so more fighters are coming out against Dana White. So stay tuned to today's video as we discuss how some of the UFC fighters are furious that Dana White gave out a $250K birthday gift while they are still underpaid. First up, what was this gift and what have other fighters said about it all? The entire UFC has had many problems over that time, but nothing is important as what's happening right now. Money is a big issue in the UFC right now as fighters believe that they deserve to be paid more and everyone is in agreement. Even someone like Dana White says that these fighters deserve to be paid more, but that the company could not actually pay more. We've seen many fights over the past few months between different UFC fighters and even boxers coming out against Dana White and the UFC. They are all in agreement that fights need to be paid more and that the UFC needs to stop spending money on random stuff that makes no sense for the company. Just recently, it seemed like things are going well as Dana was softening up to the idea of increasing payment. However, something bad recently happened as well. Just a few days ago now, Dana White, the UFC president, gave one of the NELK boys a $250,000 cash birthday present. Whilst this doesn't seem terrible on paper when you look how much money these fighters are asking for as an increase, it's trusted jerk. These fighters are arguing with Dana to get more money and Dana is saying that there is no money to give, but somehow he is giving a random YouTuber a $250,000 cash birthday present. It just makes no sense. It's just a stupid thing that's happening with the UFC and it shows how much of an idiot Dana is when it comes to showing off. Given that the pay gap between different fighters is getting frustrating, a so-called amazing president has gone down like a lead balloon, and some fighters have come out against what happened. Despite this being a UFC problem, Jake Paul has come out against Dana and took this as an opportunity to attack the boss. If you haven't been keeping up on Jake Paul recently, he has been trying to get into the UFC for months now and has been trying to make a deal with Dana on increasing the pay for its fighters. However, in his attempt to do so, the two have formed a beef between one another and Jake has begun hating the boss. When all of this came out, Jake Paul was being interviewed at the time and he had a lot to say. He said this to WFAN Sports Radio. "It sucks," Paul said. "It's embarrassing and it shows just how much of a scumbag Dana White is. How could you do that to your fighters? You're giving a birthday gift to someone, but your own flyweight champion, you can't pay him enough and there's no health care for his fighters. People are really starting to see how greedy this guy is. People are really starting to see that these fighters are underpaid. There's got to be some change made here, and the more we talk about it, the more we raise awareness, and the more we fight back, the more pressure they're going to be under to pay their fighters more. But it sucks. I feel bad for the flyweight champion. Dana White, if you're listening to this, bro, you really need to reevaluate yourself and take a hard look in the mirror." Several fighters, including a current UFC champion, took to Twitter to share their reactions on White's extravagant gift. John Fitch had one of the funniest comments on what happened, saying he's giving away the money that he stole from different fighters. It's clear that none of these fighters are happy about what happened, and whenever issues with pay comes up, Dana seems to deflect. He's been deflecting, saying that the money needs to come from different promotions and not from the UFC itself, but he's able to give out such large sums of money to some random people, it just makes no sense. Well, what do you think about all of this? Please let us know down in the comment section below your thoughts and what should happen in the future with Dana White. And now, on to some other UFC news and information from the last few weeks. Next, Sean O'Malley is back in the news once again for calling his shot against Petr Yan. It looks like Sean O'Malley is back in the news once again, and this time he is facing the biggest challenge of his entire MMA career so far. His next bout is in UFC 280 and should be between him and the bantamweight champion Petr Yan. He knows this is the best time to push his career and he's ready to take advantage of the opportunity that's been given to him. Yan is one of the best fighters in the bantamweight division right now, meaning that Will O'Malley has a tough opponent ahead of him, and he knows it. O'Malley has been what many have called a lightning rod for the UFC since he started all the way back in 2017. Throughout his entire 9-season-long run, he has only lost once and has brought an insane highlight reel of knockouts along with him. He has defeated the names of Thomas Almeida, Raulian Paiva, and even Eddie Wineland. He's clearly been stepping the game up each time, but due to an eye injury not long ago, a fight had to be stopped. He has been preparing for a long time for this match against Yan, and he knows what he is doing is going to be an interesting fire, and we can't wait to see it. Despite being a so-called disadvantage, O'Malley isn't concerned as being the underdog is one of the best things he wants. He is more than ready to level up and push public perception on his career. We don't know what's going to go down, but stay tuned to the UFC space to find out what happens. Finally, Jake Paul is putting his money on Nate Diaz for the fight against fake Khabib at UFC 279. Jake Paul is back in the news once again, and this time for another UFC story. Despite being a so-called full-time boxer, Paul seems to talk about the UFC a whole lot more than his current boxing career. He even has a fight coming up soon, but still talks more about the UFC. Clearly, he wants to get in as soon as possible. However, even though he's been talking about the UFC a lot, he hasn't made any progress on getting himself in. Therefore, he talks about betting and some of the players he's made friends with. It looks like because of a recent interview, Paul will be putting all of his money on Nate Diaz in his upcoming UFC 279 fight. In full confidence, he's betting everything on him as Diaz goes up against Shamav for the bout. We don't know the reasoning for all of this as the fight hasn't spoken much on Nate Diaz recently. We know Paul has had a good relationship with Khabib in the past, so calling this random opponent a fake Khabib seems a little disrespectful, but we don't know the true story behind it. Of course, Paul is probably just trolling here as he usually does on social media. If you haven't been keeping up with Jake Paul recently, he has been going on about the UFC a whole lot more than his boxing career. His boxing career seems to be his pride and joy, so the fact that he's talking more in the UFC space than the boxing sphere is a little worrying. We know that Paul was meant to have a massive fight with Tommy Fury in a few days' time, but is instead being replaced with another fighter because Fury had to pull out. This fighter seems like an actual fight for Paul because in the past his opponents have been lacking. Many of those around him and those in the YouTube space have teased Paul for not taking any fights with real boxers. However, this fight seemed to change that. He is fighting Hasim Rahman Jr. at the Showtime's event at Madison Square Garden in New York. This is going to be the biggest fight of Paul's career and should show if he can actually box or not. If for whatever reason he does finish this fight with a win, he might be able to move into the UFC as he can show everyone that he can fight. Of course, the UFC is a completely different style of fighting, so Paul might just end up getting destroyed. But what do you think? Let us know in the comments section below. Paul is massive in this space, so knowing what he is doing is great, and we will keep on top of it as he progresses. And that's the end of today's video. Hopefully you enjoyed this latest video. If you did, would you please let us know down in the comments section below? It would be very helpful. Make sure to like the video, comment down below, and of course subscribe to the channel with the notification bell rung. Thank you for watching today's video. Bye!